Welcome to Conversations 3X, presented by IE Horizons. Today, I'm joined by our guest, Chavisa Horemans. She's a trauma-informed coach, a consultant, and an educator. Her work at the Mother Corp, Chavisa empowers women navigating divorce, complex relationships, co-parenting, and chronic health challenges. With a blend of compassion, strategy, and practical tools, she helps clients move through their life's toughest transitions. I'm excited to speak with her and learn from her today. Hello, Chavisa. Welcome to Conversations 3X. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
So lovely to thank you for having me, Kamaljeet.
It's a pleasure. I shared a little bit about yourself, but could you explain a little bit more about the work you do as a trauma-informed coach, consultant, and an educator? And also, how did you decide on taking up this?
So this is a labor of love. This is an absolute calling of mine and a labor of love. So I'm a trauma-informed divorce, co-parenting, and chronic health coach. So I tend to work with women, and those women tend to be moms. And they are usually going through significant life transitions that are quite substantive and often quite traumatic. So separation, divorce, removing themselves from an abusive relationship, often for moms, how to navigate the transition from parenting to co-parenting. And I specialize in high conflict and gender-based violence, which is often involving like hidden abuse or post-separation abuse or financial abuse. And so there's a lot of complexity for folks often when they're dealing with a really hard relationship breakdown. And basically, my work is that I provide meaningful accompaniment and effective emotional, logistical, and practical support to people while they're going through major life transitions. And I come to this work like I have professional and academic training, which has been really great. And then I had my own awful divorce. And what became really clear is that I was able to use my professional skills to improve my safety and wellness and resolve enormous complications. But also in that long, extended period of time, what became really clear is that when women are depleted, exhausted, and isolated, then actually that works to advance the abuser's position. And so my role now is to accompany and love women through hardship so that they have someone who's in their corner, someone who will talk to them and help them strategically navigate, problem solve, think through, bring down conflict, and try and get themselves into an improved situation. So my goal is always to increase safety and wellness for people so that they can have a better next chapter of their lives.
Yeah, there are a few categories of people. I mean, I feel everyone, all specialists like you yourself, are healers in a way. We have coaches, we are having therapists, we have holistic healers, alternative healers, and then there are psychologists. So what is the difference between a coach and the other therapists or, clinical counselor? What would be the difference like?
Well, just from the onset, I'll say I'm not a therapist, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not a financial planner. I represent myself as a coach, and I'm a trauma-informed coach. And so oftentimes, if you were working with a therapist, you're addressing the past and like historical things that have happened and patterns that have you've been exposed to or you're engaged with. And so unpacking that. But a coach works from now into the short and long-term future. So I work with people now. And so one of the things I learned as I have been doing this service is that I talk to therapists because I'm interested in working with their clients who are dealing with really high conflict divorces. And they started telling me that they actually screen those clients out. They don't serve them. They don't offer them services because they're too complicated. And so what it did was it set a light bulb off for me that that's part of why the population that I work with it doesn't have enough resources, because high complexity often practitioners will avoid. And then the other part is that now when I'm not working with individuals, which is my absolute passion, is to work with individuals. When I'm not working with individuals, I'm training service providers and professionals on how to better serve high conflict divorces, people who are experiencing high conflict divorces and abuse. So right now I'm helping train frontline workers, helping train counselors and psychotherapists, helping train family lawyers on how to better serve people who are impacted by high conflict divorces and abuse.
Yeah, interestingly, I had a client. I had many clients who had similar situations, and recently, I mean, I am not naming the client, so I think it's safe enough to talk about the person. It's just that she got married, and there was an immigration application in progress, and there has been a sponsorship breakdown. And when somebody moves to Canada with the intention that okay, they are temporary here and they'll go back to their country, they have a job, they have other things to, they have friends and other family. But coming to Canada as a visitor and then finding a partner, and then after a few months realizing it was not as rosy and golden and beautiful as one would feel that okay, this is a married life, that decided to get married. It was I mean, I had to get into talking to both the individuals, both the partners, because both partners are my clients. So I had to deal with it, and I'm still dealing with it. It is a very complex area, and I've told them that this is not my area. You need to sort it out yourself. Talk to a counselor, talk to a therapist. This is not what I do. I will not represent you any further if you don't sort out your matter. They don't want to, put the application. They want to be together, but there are problems.
It's an interesting one because on one side, those kind of institutional processes produce a power imbalance where one person is sponsoring another person and then the other person becomes a dependent. Or what happens is they're in the midst of a process that they mutually agreed upon, and then the power dynamic gets exacerbated if there's a relationship breakdown. And so it's a really complicated space, and like depending on how it goes down, like in this one it sounds like they're talking and it's functional, but there's a spectrum between, to my mind, there's a spectrum between a highly loving relationship breakdown where it's friendly and amicable and mutually agreed upon, and then on the other end of the spectrum where it's a major power imbalance gets weaponized. And basically these large institutions, immigration can be one of them, but that's not the sole one. Like there's lots of institutions that get misused as a space to exact control. And so when people whose behaviors are coercive control go into those bureaucratic administrative institutions, they can rain havoc in there. And that's really problematic. And I know there's lawyers that specialize in, divorce and immigration issues.
Yeah, it could head towards a divorce. Because there is definitely power control. The principal applicant has become aware of the dark areas of the sponsor, and she's fighting an inner conflict. It's not easy to come to terms to that. And the other thing is the family back home, they think she's married, and it's hard to face them because it was her decision and it was second marriage for her.
Yeah, and so it's almost like I always say divorce is hard for 5 reasons. It's the emotional divorce, the social divorce, which you're talking about. There's the financial divorce, the legal divorce and oftentimes the workplace divorce. And so the social factors that can influence how a relationship blossoms or wilters or goes really south can be very, very put a ton of pressure on people, right? Like the social relations are really an immense factor for some people.
Yeah, yeah. So I understand that many of your clients are in vulnerable transitions like separation, identity shifts, or chronic health challenges. How do you help them feel, safe? And how do they navigate these times, while they're talking to you as well? I mean, how comfortable they are talking to you?
So I think I would imagine that pretty quickly my clients realize that I'm in their corner,
Yeah.
like that I'm there exactly for them to support them and help them. And, having somebody who gets the dynamic that you're experiencing, having someone who understands the power dynamic, so often what happens with high conflict and abuse is that when we're going through abuse or high conflict, one of the major challenges is trying to have other people understand what we're going through. And almost it produces, for some people, an additional burden where they have to try and educate people around them that institutions can be misused, that the power dynamic is performative. The person out on the street is super gregarious and lovely, but at home they're awful. So often there's a ton of weight of having to educate people about what's happening. So then with somebody like me, where I understand the power dynamics, I understand the terrain of how abuse functions, and I understand the complexity of extracting yourself from it. So basically, I alleviate the need to have to do the education with someone like me. Like I'm in their corner. So basically, I can just help them strategically navigate and problem solve so that they can, if you're going through a trauma, we don't want to stay in a trauma for too long. It's not good for us. So to have someone who can help you problem solve and navigate so that you can have a lesser exposure to trauma can be really, really powerful.
So how do you work with them? This is just that the way you talk to them. Do you give them a questionnaire or do you talk to them? How is it? How does the communication flow? Does it start? Because I can understand that many of these trauma-affected women, they do not want to write anything. They do not want to respond to questions, direct questions. So how are you able to work with them?
So I offer a free consultation call just to get a high level understanding of the situation and let them know logistically how I work as a service. And then if we agree that I could be beneficial to them and effective with them, then we can start. And I try and be highly responsive. So I can start with people sometimes within like an hour and a half, like they're like, let's start now.
They
And
need
so,
it because it's always urgent for them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. By the time they found me, they probably been looking for someone for quite some time. So I'll onboard people within a day or two often. And then literally the 1 hour session is whatever they want to speak about. So if they want help with an emotionally processing, if they want help problem solving, often people will show up and they've got something very complicated that they need to deal with. So I'm not a lawyer, so I don't do any legal, but if they need to write a letter, then we'll draft a letter together, or I had a client who was dyslexic and she was in a really complicated situation. So I just let her talk. And then I said to her, I'm going to synthesize for you and I'm going to read it back to you. And so what she needed was someone who could understand the complexity, understand the power dynamic, and put it into language with her. So I helped her draft a letter and then I read it to her so that she could, again, not have to be obliged to read it. And then she can determine what she wants to do with that letter. But for her, she was able to resolve a lot of complexity as she gets help just having somebody who can write and understand the complex power dynamic. and represent that situation accurately. So oftentimes I just help people exactly with what they need. You know, if they want to cry or rage or figure out how to safely deal with anger or how to problem solve or how to talk to their kids or how to work with their lawyers or how to navigate with their housing, like basically we just problem solve on whatever is coming up for them. So that again, we want to get people moving forward so that they're getting through the complexity they're dealing with as soon as possible.
Yeah. Yeah, you are working with people with chronic health challenges. And are there people like with mental health challenges that you work with? Or is it just any other physical health? Physical health also is traumatic. It causes, if it's chronic, then depression and anxiety tend to sink in. How are you able to work with these clients who have these chronic challenges that have affected their mental health, stability, depression, anxiety?
So again, I just work with people exactly where they are, right? So the population that I work with tends to have experienced trauma or are living with trauma. So that's the terrain that I work with folks in. So oftentimes people I'm working with have PTSD, CPTSD. And so I'm always working in the realm as a coach. I'm not a therapist. But, you know, when we are grappling with immense stressors, to be able to problem solve and have the weight of some of those burdens come off us lightens our load, right? You
Yeah.
know, like if you are in a terrible situation and you're experiencing trauma, like some people are really feeling a strong fawning or frozenness, to have someone who will be like, okay, we're going to chip at this one task. And then slowly, when they have the support to chip out a few tasks, then they lighten off, right? Like the trauma, it doesn't have that the freeze state or the fawn state starts to dissipate, and they start to, you know, like I work with people often somatically, and I work with people very much to empower them so that they start to be able to activate their capacity to look after themselves and to take good care of themselves. And you know, one of the spaces that I think about a lot is that when we're under immense stress for long periods of time, if we falter, if our health falters, if our mental health falters, then that advances the position of the abuser, right?
Yeah.
So actually, to my mind, and the way that I work with my clients is the more that we look after ourselves, protect ourselves, safeguard ourselves, that's an act of self-preservation. You know, like if we need to do self-care. I'm not talking about bubble baths and manicures. I'm talking about cellular self-care, you know, like
Yeah.
sleeping, high nutrient foods, movement, so that our cells are working in the way that they're intended, so that our bodies can persevere through this trauma or this extended problem that we're having to navigate. So I always work with my clients like on weaving self-care in and weaving somatics in so that they're able to take care and problem solve and take care of the issue at hand.
Could you elaborate more on somatics? You have mentioned somatics as a tool. That's what I understand. So could you explain a little bit more about it?
Sure. So somatics is about being in the body, right? So our bodies have nervous systems, and our nervous systems do best when they're regulated. And so when we have trauma, often we will deregulate, right? We'll have a trauma response. And so the more we are invited and safe to come back into our bodies and regulate, then the more capacity we have to take care of what's going on. So I often work with people around their breath, tools to ground into their bodies. And there's very specific ones. And then I have also, because I work with a lot of folks with trauma, I am trained in holistic trauma recovery practices that are recognized by the First Nations in this region as highly effective and high efficacy. So I always like build this, I interweave self-care and holistic self-care into the work I do with people. So I do a lot of tapping these days with people. Yeah, and a lot of like breathing together, a lot of like meditative walking, just so people start to have a number of skills that they can do, and not just in the house, but like how, if you're having a trauma at the bank, how do you look after yourself in the bank lineup? Like, what are some breathing or somatic practices you could do in a bank lineup? What are some somatic practices you can do at the bus stop? What are somatic practices you can do in the Safeways lineup? You know, just so people can take care of themselves wherever the deregulation is starting to become happening.
Yeah, I was just today morning, I was talking to somebody who makes subliminals, and he also offers EFT to his clients, along with these things that he creates with rain music or something like rain beats. And people have found it very effective, combination of the two, tapping and listening to this kind of music, very odd music, but he says it works.
Yeah, there's some magical meditation, definitely, where I mean, we're living in a very interesting time, right? Where it's like a lot of awareness, a lot of self-care, and then we have technology. So there's some really progressive postmodern meditation now with sound waves that so you can access certain parts of your subconscious that I think are highly effective. And, so there's definitely, we're in a magical realm these days in terms of, well, I think we're like, the way I articulate it is, we are in a very lucky time to be alive on Earth, because there is actually a lot of amazing trauma recovery, like high efficacy trauma recovery practices available to us these days that maybe, if we were born 80 years ago, they wouldn't be available to us.
Never heard of them. Never heard of them. I learned of EFT through Donna Iden's just one YouTube video. I said, wow, this is something very interesting.
Yeah, and EMDR is amazing. So beautiful, very clean for trauma recovery. So that's what I do, is I talk to my clients, like, I'm not a therapist, but I can say to them, when you do talk therapy, basically I do like neurobiology 101. When you do talk therapy, it works like this. But when you do EMDR, which is eye movement rapid desensitization, it works neurobiologically like this. And that's why it's so clean. So basically I can talk people through like why they might go and look for that particular modality.
Yeah, I think somewhere holistic, alternative healing and spiritual practices are all coming together. I mean, seeing your work and what you are doing, it's a combination of all of these forces together, and very interesting.
Yeah, and thanks for taking the time to know that, because that's a lot of what I do, is when I work with people with trauma and do holistic trauma recovery, oftentimes that will be energy work. So I do very like hands-on energy work with people as well, just to help them realign. So whatever they want to do, if they want to work with their minds, I can work with them with their minds. If they want to work with their bodies, or we can do both. And oftentimes, like when I'm working with clients, if I'm working with clients over an extended period of time, what we'll often do is we'll do a body session for somatics, and then we'll do a mind session to problem solve and take care of the mess. And then we'll ground, and then we'll do the mess, and then we'll ground and do the mess, so that they're looking after their bodies and their minds.
Yeah. So what kind of energy healing techniques do you use? Do you combine anything specific with it?
I'm certified in Jeikidan Reiki, which is a Japanese Reiki tradition, and I also do intuitive healing. I have a long lineage of a spiritual tradition, so I have a lot of energy work that I do with people.
I'm honored to speak with you, Chavisa. I'm grateful that you were sent my path. I don't know how this happened, but I'm having goosebumps. God bless you.
Thank you. You're a blessing.
Give me a moment. Yeah, it's amazing because when we talk about getting better, feeling better, there is no other way if you don't combine these techniques, with whatever you are doing. I feel it cannot last long. If it has to sustain, then it has to be through spiritual healing, energy healing, because it connects to the soul at the soul level, and that's where it can be cleared.
Okay, so you speak about exactly it. Okay, so when we started our conversation, I said, this is my labor of love.
Mm-hmm.
So when we have a trauma that's in relationship to a separation or divorce or abuse from a partner, oftentimes we love that partner. We were intimate with that partner. We shared our biggest feeling states and our scaredness and our tendernesses with that person. And so if they turn around and treat us awfully, it is a soul wound. It is, a major trespass. And there's a strong distinction in trauma between an unintended trauma. I go out on the street and a tree falls on my head. It's not personal. But when my ex-partner comes to level me, that is a pointed, intentionally caused trauma. And the kind of reverberation from that is very particular. And so the trauma recovery training that I have attends to spiritual and core wounds. And at the end of the day, the way I do my work and the reason I do this service is a labor of love. We can talk about all my academic training. We can talk about strategic problem solving. We can talk about all the things. But the underpinning for me is I am here to love these people. And you know what? When you have somebody who loves you and helps you get into a better position, my clients know that, and I have clients, sometimes I've had clients show up and they are like stones. Their cells are not moving. They are in such trauma that they have, become rigid. And so usually after a few sessions, then their cells start to move and then they get it. I'm really clear with my clients after a few sessions. I'm here to love you, that's what I'm doing. And most often, we agree that over time the love is mutual, right?
Absolutely.
Because that's the medicine of the world, is to be loved and to love.
Yeah, true. Thank you for sharing that. Because these barriers and even divorce and burnouts are not just personal struggles, they're influenced by society. What society does, society may not directly do anything to you, but there is a body language of the society itself that kind of penetrates your energy or your aura, and it hurts. And then one gets into a cocoon and doesn't want to talk about it, and one doesn't know how to respond to the society as well, and leave aside dealing with what's happening to the person themselves. That's there. So this is really, so you are also working with lawyers and other professionals. Do you work with doctors also, like professional doctors, to give them training in this area of work?
So I offer educational workshops across sectors. So I'm happy to work with professionals and workers across sectors. I do a suite of educational workshops on trauma-informed workplaces, holistic trauma recovery, which is really useful because if somebody in your space is experiencing trauma, then either you're bearing witness to it or you're exposed to it, or you can adequately support them and help them. And when you take care of the person in front of you, effectively what you're doing is giving yourself a gift as well, because then you're not exposed to the trauma in front of you getting much larger. right? So you're actually gifting yourself less trauma exposure.
Yeah.
And then the third workshop I do is on gender-based violence because that's so prevalent. And then the fourth one I do is on high conflict divorces. And so I'm happy to train across sectors. And so I work with whomever is interested in that.
Yeah, I attended a workshop that was for people who work in legal services. And because in particularly this was for refugee clients, like they carry a lot of baggage with them doing their legal work. It becomes very, very challenging, and then you end up being a counselor to them, which is not your area, and how to discriminate at that point of time between the two, and how does one explain to the client as well. How do you train? In fact, my question should be, how do you train these legal advocates or lawyers?
Well, I mean, to my mind, family law, criminal law, and likely immigration, especially refugee immigration, is for sure going to be traumatic. Like those are traumatic spaces, right? So, in which case, it's really useful to understand basics of neurobiology. It's really important to understand what trauma looks like, what the what trauma presents like, and then how we can support it because it's neurobiological. So if we understand how the brain functions, just simply in terms of plain language, then we can more effectively do interventions and we can more effectively respond so that, again, it's, stays in a manageable terrain as opposed to exacerbates. And so that, like I said, that's a major, to have that skill set and to understand those holistic practices, understand that basic neurobiology is a skill set that you can give to your clients and you can give to yourself.
You also mentioned in the beginning you work with 5 kinds of divorces. That was very interesting. Could you elaborate a little bit on them?
So when we get divorced, there's like multiple components, right? There's the emotional rupture between you and that other person who you're separating or divorcing from. But then you're talking, and this is our part of our conversation, is all the social forces, right? Like, what does your mother-in-law think? What does your brother think? What does your niece and nephew think? How is it for your kids? What does the person at your spiritual organization think? So there's all the social impact on the relationship adjustment. And then, of course, relationships are often financially bound together. And so if there's financial issues, and there usually is, especially in gender-based violence, then, the financial implications. We live in a society where when people start coming together as a couple, one of the things they do, for example, is they go and get a shared bank account together. They go and purchase a house or a car. All of those spaces are financial touch points that when a relationship breaks down, they have to be addressed. So finances are a major one. And oftentimes, there's a significant transition from going from a 2 adult earning household to being a solo income earner. That changes the financial terrain pretty substantially, and that really can impact women, where they have to rethink how they're going to pull off the next chapter, especially if they're parents and the financial obligations of being parents. And then, of course, there's the legal divorce, which is a whole different discourse, which is a whole different set of interests and really focal points, right? Like the law is interested in equitable division of assets. They're not so interested in emotional abuse or how to take care of the emotional complexity. So it's really like understanding and trusting how you intersect with all the legal avenues. And then the fifth one is a workplace divorce. And I say that because usually when we are employees, then we have a set number of days that we can have a holiday, and that holiday is usually intended to restore ourselves. But if you're taking your holidays to go do legal processes, you're not restoring yourself. you're actually doing another job. So, in the middle of a very complicated divorce, often people are working their full-time jobs and they're doing their legal job, right? And so it's not a space of rest for people. And so, this has implications for workforces when people are not getting the recuperation time that they need so that their bodies are strong.
Yeah, very interesting. And when you're talking about workplace divorce, also there's something similar that comes to my mind is when people get laid off from work during a challenge like that. They're fighting their own battle in their personal life. That is a kind of they're having a legal divorce, or they're going through the process of separation itself. And then they are laid off at work for whatever be the reason. It is another thing that is very, very difficult to navigate.
Yeah, and oftentimes that produces another space where you need to get another kind of lawyer involved, right? Especially if there's been an injustice or an incorrect termination. So, I mean, people are grappling with a lot and they're navigating an awful lot. And even if we invert it, and I hear these stories often of like, and I'm always curious about this in terms of what I understand about neurobiology, is like the spaces where we're seeing trauma, but our culture celebrates it, right? Like the over focused hyper worker, the worker who is getting divorced and now they've married their company and now they're working 70 hours a week as a coping mechanism, right? As a survival mechanism to maybe not spend as much time on the emotional reality of it. And so we're in a culture that says, oh, wow, that person's an amazing worker and they just got a promotion and they're spectacular in their role. But also, like, if you look at the whole picture and the holistic picture, like maybe that's just a societally approved coping mechanism that actually isn't so healthy, right? Like maybe it would be better to work 40 hours and go see a therapist and process through your grieving.
Yeah, but then that doesn't come to mind, because the only thing that may just come to mind is that you need to keep your mind occupied, keep doing something subconsciously. You keep doing it because you are distracted from the key issue of whatever pain and trauma that you need to deal with. Um, and there are other things of what I've seen that affect especially immigrants, is the impact of so-called diversity and inclusion. It's a huge program, and this is something that comes to my mind very often. How successful has this program been for the government of Canada? I mean, I feel it is, there is this a lot of money and funding has gone into these projects for diversity, inclusion, equity, and now this gender-based violence also. There's a lot of funding that is going into it. How effective these programs are? What are your thoughts on it?
I'd love to see it be more effective.
Yeah.
Those are my thoughts. Like there's still, I just think about like in the area that I work, gender-based violence. There's still a lot of stigma for people who experience trauma, and there's still a lot of institutional trespasses that happen for people who articulate that they've experienced trauma. And it's a difficult space to navigate. And as a society, we have a lot of way to progress in terms of dismantling systemic biases and stigma. And it's one thing to say forward facing, we're inclusive and accept everyone. And then on the back end, it's like, well, what are their HR practices? What are their legal practices? Are they walking the talk? Because the HR and the legal practices need to line up with their forward-facing messaging.
Yeah, interestingly, I was talking to somebody the other day, and this person works in a creative field. And coming to Canada I'm talking about newcomers because I'm myself an immigrant, came about a little over 2 decades ago, and I connect a lot with these stories and experiences of people. And professionally, she does beautiful work, both in creative designing and paintings, things like that. Coming to Vancouver, it was a huge challenge to enter the market, even to showcase her work. And what I learned from her was it was kind of Vancouver art monopoly. It's a handful of people, and these are the privileged class. And, they are doing the work, and it affected her for many years. And it's only now that she's coming out of it, and she said, no, I want to do what I am trained to do, and I love to do that. But then she has wasted a lot of years in coming up to the point of accepting, like, no, I need to do that work. This also is a kind of a trauma. What do you feel about it?
Well, it sounds like she's got amazing resilience and perseverance. So, but I agree, we struggle with the dominant forces in the culture. I mean, I'm an immigrant too. I came when I was really little. And so that's part of how I am able to do the work I do, is that I understand, like, how we look and what our life experience is like can sometimes be misread, right? And so
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with people. Like, I work with clients all over Turtle Island, North America. So I work with a lot of folks in the US and Canada, throughout the states and throughout the provinces. And so, a lot of people are grappling with power relation issues. And, we have to, again, it's this space of like authenticity and forging forward and trying to craft and cobble together a life that sits well with us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's certainly
Yeah.
challenges.
You've had clients like that who have ever shared, have they opened up about this part of their life?
Oh yeah. I mean, like, I help clients write letter on racial injustice and
Yeah,
how
yeah.
systems are being weaponized. Because sometimes, my clients are sharing very tender experiences with me, and they're sharing often immense complexity with me, and often they don't have anybody, other people who are getting it. So I'm here to just listen and then, be a loving mirror that holds it back. So often I've worked with clients who I'm helping them write about racial inequity and racial injustice, just so that they can, again, more effectively demonstrate the position that they're in, and that actually maybe institutions and forces have been misused on their cases, and to demonstrate that.
And have you seen any of that? Have they gone a step further to take some action? Like, did it really work out, or did it bring them, did it give them some confidence to say, like, okay, I took this step, I was hurt, I took this step, and it worked, or at least I've been able to put my voice forward?
And so usually what I work with is long extended divorces. So they take a long time to go through, but I can say definitively, like, I've had lawyers contact me that they want, very particular letters of support or to articulate the situation. So I work with people in as best as I can to serve them and help them be able to represent their situations so that they can improve their safety and wellness.
Yeah, yeah. You also mentioned about co-parenting. So what is it that co-parenting is when they have already divorced or they are separated? Um, Is it for those parents that you're talking about?
So usually, let's say two people are married and they have kids, then they're parenting together. But when a relationship breaks down, often what will happen is it will transition to co-parenting, which is in British Columbia, it's standardly done that both parents are given 50%. And so the child is then going between two homes. And so there's a real art to setting up legal paperwork so that that's going to function as best as possible. And let's say, I'll just give you an example. Like, let's say a child is quite young. Let's say it's a 3-year-old. The parenting arrangement that's going to be set up is going to be set up for quite a long trajectory. Kids age out at 18 years of age. So if there's abusiveness between the parents, if there's a power dynamic or a course of control happening, then what we want to do is make sure that we attend to, think through as much of that terrain as possible so that there's less touch points for conflict going forward, right? Like, so, when you've got a 3-year-old little cherub in the house, it's important to be mindful that at some point, maybe you're going to have to be talking about soccer camp. And at some point, you're going to have to be talking about braces. And at some point, you're going to have to be talking about who's keeping the passport and who decides on which school the kid's going to go to, right? So these kind of, like, I just help people. I'm not a lawyer, but what I can do is talk to people about all the touch points so that they understand, look, here is where a lot of people have trouble. So really think carefully about this space. And here, let's talk about medical and health benefits, because actually access to health and dental benefits makes a huge financial difference, right? Especially if we can imagine that when kiddo is 12, they're going to need $10,000 or so of braces or even more, right? Like, so it's just important that people understand the sort of terrain that they're in. That way they can make more informed decisions, and that way they can just go in with more specificity on the nuances about what to pay attention to. Because there's nothing worse than formalized legal paperwork that's missed something, and now there's space for conflict.
Yeah, I've seen this conflict more often in my experience. I've worked with quite a few women who, in fact, some of them just left their kids with the other partner, saying that, okay, you have the control. I don't want the child to be traumatized, coming to me, then going back there, or sometimes they don't. The partner who is more wealthy gets the main custody of the child, even if she's not the mother. It is, and I know of women who just gave up on their children because of this particular issue, especially in our South Asian communities.
Yeah. So, but I would reframe it and say they haven't given up on their kids. They've given up on being able to safeguard their kids, right?
Yes, that would be the right, absolutely, that's the correct way to put it.
Because I think like in the population that I work with, very rarely do women give up on their kids. It's that the power relations are not adequately attended to, and so that approach seems like a solution, although I would argue it's an incredibly painful, traumatic solution.
Yeah, the mother would need a lot of support, and she will need to do a lot of work on herself, which is not easy. Generally, mothers are never in a position to do that, to respond to their own inner healing, cry for healing. It's because now, of course, for the past few years, I'm noticing that women are more open to healing or taking, taking coaching as, what you do yourself. But they might talk in their own circles a little bit in hush-hush voices and see if there's a solution that can work for them. But solutions don't come like that. You need to do the work on yourself and deal with it, face it and deal with it.
Yeah, and it takes an incredible amount of bravery to do that and an incredible amount of labor, and it's quite painful. I think it is very valuable to take the time to understand the patterns so that you can unpack them. So from the space that I sit in, it's really important to invest in never repeating the same behavior again, right? Like, to my mind, it's like I've had one abusive husband, but I will never have a second abusive relationship. And that's because I invested in an enormous amount of learning and reflection and practicing so that, it's not that there's plenty of abusive people available, but that I'm able to effectively screen for them. I'm effectively able to assert boundaries. I'm effectively able to say no, and I'm effectively able to remove myself from that and the willingness to do that, which is an enormous skill set to learn.
Yeah, removing yourself from that is not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
But I think the other space that you're talking about is, and I wanted to speak to this because I think it's really important. Like, we live in a context where there's a lot of nonprofits, and the nonprofits do really beautiful work. And like right now, we're seeing that funding is being cut at the federal level, which is going to potentially be disastrous if they're not able to do an effective intervention. And then I work as a trauma-informed coach. So I'm kind of coming in as a new service provider to alleviate gaps. And what's interesting about this is in my service, like, what I'm finding is I'm getting the moms who they're well established. They could never go to a support group. They could never put their name or face on what they're dealing with or to be publicly identified, or they're at home with very small children and they could never leave the house to go to a Tuesday support group, or they just need somebody where they've got 45 minutes after work where they get this snippet of time that's for them, and they could have a session with someone like me, exactly sculpted to exactly their needs. And so the service I've produced is very responsive. Like I said, some of my clients will onboard within an hour and a half, 2 days. And I really, if the client needs a session at 7 a.m, then we'll try and make it happen. If I had a session the other night with somebody at 9 to 10 p.m., because that's when her daughter had fallen asleep. So I really try and sculpt it to my client's needs, because I know that that's what's really critical, is that it be highly responsive to their needs.
Yeah. Again, I feel very honored talking to you at this point of time, because there's so much that you have. You're contributing a lot, and I hope people are able to benefit. They reach out to you.
People are absolutely welcome to contact me, and thank you for your love and support. I really appreciate it. I've got a website, which is the Mother Corp. So TheMotherCorp.com. And people are welcome to email me or text me. I have some social media channels people can message me on as well. And so I offer a free consultation call. Really, I just want to make sure that when we have a high-level overview, that I'm able to be highly effective with people. So they tell me their situation and I don't think I can help, I'll let them know right away. And I'll, give them ideas on other resources. But if I'm able to help them, then I'm happy to work with them as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah. So how do you use spiritual insights, with your own experience and your learning and training and your background, to realize the interconnectedness of all of us, Like even if you have a partner who is abusive, you're still connected, at a soul level, and without what is the right word? Without relying on religious resources and frameworks, because people are religious somewhere. Many people are going back to religion, and or they are already practicing or following some kind of religion, and they also know that they are interconnected, at some point of time. How do you deal with, how do you provide insights to a person like that? It's just that it comes to my mind because my mind works like that.
Yeah, sure. And
I feel that it's, I hope that I'm able to explain what I'm asking.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're in a really interesting and complicated terrain. When I do my land acknowledgement, I always end with the phrase sawak, which means we are all interconnected. So we are all interconnected. We are all interconnected. And, it's really important that we have boundaries. It's really important that we don't accept being abused, because actually we need to live. I mean, when I think about dominant religions, ideally the underpinning would be love. And the interconnection is around love. But at the end of the day, this is about embodied ethics and values, right? Like how I prepare my breakfast is actually can be embodied values and ethics, right? Like what food did I select? What plate am I putting it on? Was it factory made? Was it homemade? Is the egg ethically made or farm made? Like I get to make these ethical choices at frequent moments in my life. And so again, like that kind of application in our relationships, are they mutually beneficial? Is it a shared power dynamic? And so, we can live our ethics and values in terms of how we relate to other people. Yeah. And we can also love people and let them go, right? Like that person, if somebody's abusive to you, you can care about them, but not allow their abusiveness to come into your space, right? Because actually we have to love ourselves, right? And that's part of self-care, is that that love for oneself, love for the other, right? And I always think about it as a ripple out effect. You drop a stone into water and it ripples out. And that's part of why I love the work I do. I love one woman, and you know what? Her kids are the beneficiaries.
Yeah.
And then her friends are the beneficiaries, her family's the beneficiary, her colleagues are the beneficiary. Because if this one woman can be well taken care of through trauma and crisis, and she's calmer, then the ripple out effect is all the people around her are the beneficiaries of that. So my work is, in part, I feel so happy with it because I know I'm getting to help lots of people when I help one person.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautifully explained. So, Chavisa, can you, it's been quite a while, quite some time now, and would you like to share any key message for anybody, people from all walks of life, women, youth, children, anything special for them? How to empower themselves and transition through trauma and difficult moments in life when they are caught up at the wrong time, wrong place.
Yeah, well, to my mind, and I spent a lot of time thinking about this, it's about who's able to access resources, right?
Yeah.
And so, when we strategically resource and get resourced, then we can get ourselves into better positions, right? Like, and sometimes we have to like weigh out which resources we want to go for. But actually protecting your mental health and protecting your mind is a key resource, right? So I always think like protect your mental health first, and we can go find food. Like there's food available in the community. but your mental health is a non-negotiable, right? So it's like, how do you prioritize self-care? But I think, you know, the more we're able to look after ourselves and protect ourselves, then especially for moms, when you look after yourself, it's an act of looking after your kids.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Truly, I really appreciate. Maybe sometimes I can learn more in detail about every aspect of your life, whatever work that you are doing, helping people as a coach and an educator. I wish you well till then. Yeah, thanks. Thanks a lot for joining me on Conversations 3X. I also started this a few years ago based on my own experience. It's about time.
And you know what? What I love about your questions is that they're so wholesome, and that you do acknowledge the spiritual realm, which is so important for me, and that I love that holistic conversation. So thank you. I feel very blessed speaking to you, Kamaljit, and thank you for having me as a guest.
Thank you so much.
Take good care of yourself.
I'll share your information too, and I will talk to you soon.